Many much thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. Hello and welcome to the Grand Line Review, your source for everything One Piece. My name is Liam and my ideal room temperature is about 19 degrees Celsius. Slightly cold is good. Slightly hot is not good. And today we are here to talk about a rather strange band of Luffy-based sycophants that we know as the Straw Hat Grand Fleet. So if you're a manga reader, you'll realize that we haven't seen these guys in quite a long time. And if you're an anime watcher, you'll realize that we haven't seen these guys in quite a really long time. And this is because the manga had some super special Grand Fleet cover stories that were never animated, which blows my mind because there is so much important stuff that will become integral in the future. And with that in mind, this video is intended to take us through what happened to the Grand Fleet after the events of Dressrosa, as well as to dive into where they may or may not be appearing next in the story. And just to be clear, there are no spoilers for anime-only watchers in this video. However, there will be a lot of information that you don't know and likely never will know, because all of this stuff will never be animated for reasons that they're beyond me. But it's all going to begin with a quick round of Grand Fleet or Grand Sheep, a very simple minigame, the rules of which are as follows. Within this pasture sits 3 Grand Fleet cosplaying sheep, and it is going to be your job to guess which of these Grand Sheep members will say "Bah" first. Now, should you guess incorrectly, then your punishment will be to subscribe to the Grand Line Review, thus resulting in consistent injections of One Piece culture administered directly into your YouTube feed. And if you are correct, then it will be your job to feed the sheep. So which will bah first? 1, 2, or 3? Select your Grand Sheep now and we shall reveal the answer in 3, 2, 1. And bam, it was Cavern Sheep, because that one never shuts up. So if you guessed either Eulumbus or Bartolomeo, then you know the thing to do, and please do say hi in the comments below if you are a new member of the Grand Fleet. Welcome. Cavendish is a pretty good place to start though. His post-Dressrosa story is quite easy to tell because it's entirely self-indulgent, and it begins with a catch-up of the beautiful pirate sailing away from Dressrosa, currently being pursued by enemy ships. And we also have a brief reminder that Suleiman, one of the Colosseum fighters, has now joined Cavendish's crew. Now this is a very important plot thread because as a new member, Cavendish then felt it necessary to tell the story of how he became a pirate, much to Farul's frustration. Essentially though, Cavendish was a prince of the bourgeois kingdom who single-handedly caused a national crisis simply by existing. This is because Cavendish was so popular that literally every young woman in the country was refusing to get married because they had their eyes on Cavendish's Cavendish. In response to this, Cavendish was exiled for the crime of being too popular, and he was given 500 million berries and only a mere 74 servants to live off. And such squalor made Cavendish quite miserable, so he became a pirate, and to cut a long story short, the ships currently chasing them are not in fact enemies, but rabid fangirls from the bourgeois kingdom who also became pirates in order to find, capture, and marry Cavendish. So that's mostly what Cavendish spends his time doing, reminiscing about himself and running from fangirls. In addition to that, he is also spreading the good word of Luffy and actively seeks out reporters to speak to, no doubt to also give himself some incidental focus as well. Fun question for all of you. Who has the better hair? Cavendish or a young Whitebeard? So the Cavendish story is more or less exactly what you'd expect, but then we move on to Bartolomeo, who has had an incredibly impactful series of events. After leaving Zou, the Barto Club embark on a renewed mission to transform the world into Straw Hat fanatics. And as their first mission, they land on this mysterious unnamed island. In a typical show of dominance, Bartolomeo then finds and defeats the biggest of the menfolk on the island, after which point the citizens promptly surrender. Then instead of doing all sorts of evil pirate-based things, Bartolomeo forces the residents to purchase Straw Hat merchandise, which includes all sorts of delightful pins and stickers and stuff. However, plot twist. It is at this point that the Barto Club realize the island they've just attacked is under the control of one of the 4 emperors. And not just one of the emperors, but this island is specifically under the umbrella of Shanks and the Red Hair Pirates. Now, normally this would be cause for concern, but we're dealing with Bartolomeo here. So his natural response was to burn Shanks' Jolly Roger and effectively declare war on the emperor, much to the shock and pure dread of the citizens, which is the grand cliffhanger that we leave Bartolomeo lingering on, very potentially starting a fight with Shanks on Luffy's behalf. And I can only imagine that Shanks would take this in good humor, but then again, he does have red hair, doesn't he? And red equals angry. Then we move on to the newly appointed Donsai of the Happo Navy, and he's one of the 2 Grand Fleet members that we have seen comparatively recently at the Reverie, but he had some business to settle before heading to the El Marijois. Sai returned to his home nation of Kano in West Blue, which immediately led to an awkward situation with Sai's fiancée, Uholisha. Awkward because because, as we remember while on Dressrosa, Sai, in the heat of the moment, had proposed to Baby 5. So Sai had to break some tough news to Uhulisha, and Uhulisha had to break quite a bit of Sai in response to this news. Uhulisha then returned home to her husband club, where she revealed that Sai would have been her 26th husband, and that she could not believe that she ever considered the possibility of letting him attain that coveted spot. We then see a heavily injured Sai marrying Baby 5 in a wonderful ceremony before he heals up to attend the reverie. And here he met up with all sorts of former Luffy-based associates. However, what happened to him during and after the reverie is currently unknown. And also, the poor soul who did eventually end up becoming Uhulisha's 26th husband is also currently unknown. At which point we cut to what is probably the least remembered of the Grand Fleet groups, which is the Deo Pirates featuring Hideo, as well as Blue Gilly, Jeet, and Abdullah. And it should be known that they originally went by the ill-conceived name of the XXX Gym Martial Arts Alliance, but they likely changed that name once they realized it sounded just a little too similar to a Redline tube video. So this teeny tiny crew of 4 were given a ship by Olympus, and after setting sail from Dressrosa, they swiftly encountered a sea battle. Hideo and the crew then intervened to stop the fighting, quite notably by fighting themselves, and then they discovered that this is actually a feud between the members of the Long Arm tribe and the Long Leg tribe. And this is a feud that has lasted roughly 1,000 years at this point, and very notably, Hideo is a Long Arm member, whilst Blue Gilly is a Long Leg member. And since those two natural enemies had learned to work together, they decide to try and heal this feud by stranding members of both tribes on a deserted island and hoping that they would work out their differences in order to escape. They didn't really care too much, to be honest. And then the Deo Pirates sailed onwards to discover more glory, whatever form that may take. And sadly, that was the last that we have seen of this particular group. They weren't the only ones to form a new pirate crew, however, as after Dressrosa, Leo and the Tontana tribe decided to become pirates as well. Very kind and noble pirates, mind you, because as their first act as a crew, they decided to help out and oversee the rebuilding of Dressrosa. To show their thanks, the carpenters of Dressrosa then built them a ship known as the Usoland, and it features a hilarious bow with Usopp's trademark Sugarface. Best thing of all though, the ship itself was scaled to the Tontana tribe members, so it's really teeny tiny and quite adorable. And as one of Dressrosa's key special forces, the Tontana Pirates were assigned to escort King Riku to the reverie. However, they did end up splitting the crew, with the top officers going to Marijois and having a small defense force remaining on Dressrosa. And that second part is particularly important because this force were the ones who discovered and saved Pound, who had floated all the way to Dressrosa from Whole Cake Island. Although just as with Sai and the Harpo Navy, we are unaware of what happened to Leo and his faction during and after the reverie. And the only other thing I have to give you is this image of Leo as a child being enamored by nuts. We then very excitingly move to Harudin, and he has by far the most straightforward story in this Grand Fleet series, which begins with him resigning from Buggy the Clown's organization of things that do stuff. And Buggy does not take this news well, although to be fair, Buggy doesn't take many things well. Certainly not criticism about his shiny red nose. But we are then reminded of Harudin's mission in life, which is to reform the Giant Warrior Pirates, which is the crew that Dory and Broggy were the former co-captains of before it disbanded. So we are then introduced to the 5 members of the new Giant Warrior Pirates, being our captain, Harudin, the shipwright Stanson, and there's our navigator, whose name is Rode, which I feel is kind of like having a doctor named Syringe. You know, the whole my name is one of the things that I use in my job style of characters. Their actual doctor's name is Gerd, though, who is relevant because she's one of only 2 female giants that we've ever met in the series, the other being the unnamed marine giant who is part of the Giant Squad. And then we have the cook, Goldberg, and this might seem like a bunch of characters just appearing out of nowhere, but the really cool thing about this crew is that they all appear in Big Mom's flashback. There's children and baby things, of course, but they are there. In fact, Gerd in particular was a good friend of Charlotte Linlin prior to the incident. So that was a nice look at the next generation of giants who have now pledged their loyalty to the Straw Hats. We then check in on probably the most bizarre story of all, which is a day in the life of Olympus. How exciting. This is by far the longest story in the Grand Fleet series because we spend a lot of time watching Olympus do seemingly mundane things like folding his pajamas. That's the whole page right there. And it was in response to this that Olympus actually became a meme in Russia specifically. This is because of a Russian YouTuber named Sadbag who decided to begin worshipping Olympus and taking his daily rituals as some sort of comedic religious doctrine. And that has had a massive effect to this very day, as Olympus managed to rank 78th in the World Top 100 Character Poll, which can be attributed entirely to the Olympus meme base in Europe. In any case, after joining the Grand Fleet, Olympus announced announced his retirement from his affiliated kingdom, and then we were given a slow hour-by-hour installment of the daily life of Olympus, which I would describe as vapidly fascinating. There is nothing interesting about this story, nothing whatsoever, and yet that nothing is what makes it so interesting. It is a work of art. A work of art that raises questions, ever so many questions, which I suppose in the end is what art is intended to do. And you might think that that's the end of the Grand Fleet, but it is not, because we were also given insight into a very special honorary member by the name of Bellamy. He has a rather curious short story where he arrives at a town famous for producing dyed goods, and having recently retired from piracy, Bellamy then decides to study as an apprentice dyer. And the last thing we see of Mr. Bellamy is him drafting a new Jolly Roger with a very familiar straw-hatted symbol on it. And it is theorized that what Bellamy is doing here is creating a Jolly Roger for the Straw Hat Grand Fleet, which is exciting, and he is definitely the character who I am personally most curious about in this series. But the question then becomes, when and where will this Grand Fleet reappear again in the future? Apart from Sai meeting up with Leo at the Reverie, the Grand Fleet have taken entirely separate paths from now. However, let's not forget the ominous words of the narrator at the end of Dressrosa. 7 odd and mighty warriors labeled themselves the followers of Straw Hat Luffy. After this moment, they will each grow in power, until they eventually cause a great incident of historic proportions. But for the moment, that is a story no one yet knows about. And as such, there was, and I suppose there still is, a lot of speculation that the Grand Fleet may show up on Wano, because it does make some logical sense. Considering we're in a situation up against 2 of the 4 emperors, I feel like these guys might be just a little bit useful right now. But we're talking about Luffy here, and when we're talking about Luffy, logic becomes somewhat irrelevant, because I believe his exact words were, "If I think we're in trouble, I'll shout for your help. Then you can come save us." And Luffy, for whatever reason, has not put out the call for help on Wano. So the Grand Fleet seemed far more positioned to be actors in the final saga of One Piece, very potentially to be tapped at a very dark moment for Luffy. One where he or the crew are so desperate that they do light the beacons. The Grand Fleet reform with their significantly bigger and better powers, and end up causing that great event of historic proportions like the prophecy foretold. And my very basic thinking immediately snaps to the Blackbeard Pirates. Luffy, the Straw Hats, and the Grand Fleet versus Blackbeard and his Emporatic forces. That would seem like a pretty amazing climactic conclusion to the series. Although the other possibility for a Straw Hat army would be to fight against the Marines, because it's hard to know what the ultimate conflict will be, whether it's a battle against the Blackbeard Pirates or the world government, or just one big gigantic that redefines the world. So it does very much depend on who the ultimate of enemies is, but I still have my berries on Blackbeard right now. The Marines do have other natural forces that can be used to deal with them as well, like the Revolutionary Army, or even all of those warlords of the sea that they've now made enemies of. Whatever the case may be, do not forget about these Grand Fleet dude guys. They may be in the background right now, and I would not at all count on them being relevant for Wano, but they will be back. And they will be outrageously important. Almost as outrageously important as Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. Squarespace gives you a powerful and versatile platform to craft not only your own website, but also your own community. It does this through a powerful combination of blogging tools, Squarespace extensions, and displaying posts from your social profiles. Connect with your audience and generate revenue through gated members-only content. Manage your members, send email communications, and leverage audience insights all on this one easy-to-use platform. Go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/grandlinereview to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. And then after that, go and grab yourself some more One Piece from this here video. There's always more to learn, experience, and enjoy about the series, so I look forward to seeing you there.